Most interesting statement from Judge Merchan just a few moments ago before he left the bench was acknowledging Trump's election win. He was saying, ordinary citizens don't get these kind of legal protections. It's the office of the presidency that is bestowing these to the office holder. And he said it is the citizenry of this nation that recently decided that you should once again receive the benefits of those protections, essentially acknowledging that, yes, because Donald Trump is going to be inaugurated in a few days, that is changing the sentencing here.
But the fact is that I'm totally innocent. I did nothing wrong. They talked about business records, and the business records were extremely accurately counted. I had nothing to do with them. That was done by an accountant or a bookkeeper who I think gave very credible testimony and was corroborated by everybody that was asked. And with all that's happening in our country today, with the city that's burning to the ground, one of our largest, most important cities burning to the ground, with wars that are uncontrollably going on, with all of the problems of inflation and attacks on countries and all of the horrible things that are going on, I got indicted over calling a legal expense a legal expense. It was called a legal expense.
All right, guys, so we got to talk about what I am calling a delayed W. Okay, this is essentially a W that we're getting because Democrats are desperate. And they really are stuck between a rock and a hard place when it comes to their lawfare against Trump that has absolutely failed. Okay, over the last 4 years, they've been trying to get Trump. Okay, they wanted to lock him up. They wanted to throw him off the ballot. They tried everything that they could. Ultimately, what it came down to is that Trump got convicted in the hush money trial, a case that nobody gave a damn about at all. And ultimately, that may have helped him win the election, okay? And now, because he is president-elect, he is going to be president of the United States, okay? I mean, he basically already is president, to be honest with you. It is now impossible for Democrats to lock him up without ruining the last moral victory that they can have over Trump, which is that, well, Trump is a convicted felon, right? That's essentially kind of where we're at, okay? They can't lock him up. They can't throw him in jail. They can't stop him from being president. So now they have to accept that the worst thing they can do to Trump is to continue to smear his reputation, okay? As if that actually really matters, by trying to officially have him be labeled as a convicted felon. And that is what this sentencing is all about from Judge Merchan, who presided over the fraudulent hush money case. And Trump tried to stop the sentencing from happening, okay? Because Trump doesn't want to give the Democrats an inch, right? Even a moral victory, he knew he wasn't going to jail, right? Doesn't matter. Trump tried to challenge it, unfortunately for Trump, but also at the same time, kind of fortunately as well, too, and I'll tell you guys why in a minute. The Supreme Court decided to reject Trump's bid to delay or to stop the sentencing, okay? And we're going to talk more about that, but just understand that Democrats, they've been losing so much. They've taken so many L's that they're now celebrating, again, what comes down to a moral victory. That's it.
So this is fair. It is what it is. He's convicted. That's justice. That's justice.
Cousin, what are your thoughts?
I agree. I think there's two things here, right? There's that accountability, but then there's also the fact that the judges upheld the ability for this case not to be dismissed.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that that is really important because not only is it justice, it is justice. It is the criminal justice system playing itself out, not allowing Donald Trump to utilize his position of importance to just allow things to just go away. It is allowing him to be held accountable. It is showing that the rule of law will prevail if allowed to. And I think that is such an important message to tell to the public. Yes, you're absolutely right. It is difficult if I was a convicted felon and I was convicted of the same exact crimes that Donald Trump was, and I got a heightened sentence just because I'm not Donald Trump. Yes, that is hard to digest. But at the end of the day, I think one thing that is very important is that every criminal defendant has the right to have various factors be weighed in their sentencing and it to be applied appropriately.
Let's go.
Yeah, so the cope is real. Okay, just a year ago, these same individuals, the mainstream liberal media, they were hopeful, they were giddy, they were excited about the prospect of Trump going to jail, right? That Jack Smith was going to get him. Fannie Willis was going to get him, right? Alvin Bragg was going to get him. He was going to get got, right? And they were going to try to remove him from the ballot. And if all else fails, then hey, he would lose the election because it's too much, right? It's too much, okay? He would not be able to win the election considering all the propaganda and the hate and vitriol in the mainstream liberal media that was thrown against Trump. Turns out none of those things worked, okay? Trump still ended up getting elected despite being convicted in the fraudulent and rigged hush money case that we now know, due to the fact that the sentencing was today, that Trump is not going to face any real punishment for, right? Outside of being labeled a convicted felon, okay? And effectively, this means that Trump won, right? Trump won considering all the things that the Democrats and the powers that be, the establishment, tried to throw against him to stop him from becoming president. Even CNN is admitting that, Trump won, right? Trump definitely won. Take a look.
Who's covering the White House with us was Paula Reed, who is standing by. Paula, your thoughts on what we just witnessed? Pretty extraordinary stuff. Not just the sentence of an unconditional release, which means he's not going to do any jail time, the fact that he is going to be going into the White House as a convicted felon, but the fact that he appeared virtually in those stunning images we just saw a few moments ago of him appearing in the courtroom on a flat screen in front of the judge with his attorney by his side and the flags behind him.
Yeah, just zoom out here. Big picture. Yeah. 6 months ago, he faced 4 criminal cases. He had been convicted in the New York hush money case, which was considered the least serious of the 4. And now, even though he has been convicted, he has received really no punishment there. The 2 federal cases against him have been dismissed. And the Georgia case, the prosecutor has been disqualified. That case is not completely dead, but it's basically on life support. I mean, if we look at his legal defense team, this is an extraordinary victory. Now, they got a couple big assists from the Supreme Court over the course of the last 2 years. But the fact that they have been able to keep their client from really facing any consequences across 4 criminal cases is truly extraordinary. And today is really the symbol of their successful defense of their client.
All right, I want to go out to Laura Coates, who's been watching this too. Laura, you've been covering this, and if you could put your legal analyst hat on for a moment. I mean, your thoughts on Trump entering the White House as a convicted felon, but with this sentence of an unconditional release. What does it all add up to you?
Well, I'm going to put on my legal analyst beret, if you don't mind, because it already goes with the look today. But let me tell you what this looks like for many people. Many people are looking at whether there are 2 systems of justice in America. Well, I got to tell you, Donald Trump right now is in a league of his own for the reasons that my colleagues have described. But an unconditional release, normally if somebody is convicted of a crime and does not have a jail sentence imposed, a probationary period comes in. They're checking in with a probation officer. They may have to engage in drug testing. They may have to have certain jobs or endeavor to have them. Community service. They have to keep their nose clean. How often you've heard that said? In order to make sure that they don't have the ability to be actually brought into a jail. Donald Trump doesn't have any of those conditions. The condition he now has is to maintain his role as the commander-in-chief and president of the United States. But why he is fighting this so hard is not just the pure ego or the aversion to having been convicted. It shows you the stigma in our country of what it's like to be a convicted felon.
Yeah, and that's ultimately what it comes down to, right? The stigma of being a convicted felon. Even though, in my opinion, I think it doesn't matter. The American people have already spoken that it doesn't matter. But at the same time, I can understand why Trump did not want to give the Democrats or these deranged individuals in the media an inch, okay, when it comes to being able to say that, well, he's a convicted felon, right? Which is something that they continue to repeat because at this point they've lost so much that that's what they're holding on to, right? They're holding on to a label. But effectively, what they wanted to happen, which was for Trump to be locked up and to not be president, that didn't happen, right? It didn't happen at all. So everybody knows that Trump won. And I have more bad news for those in the liberal media and the Democrats who are celebrating this moral victory of having Trump labeled as a convicted felon before inauguration, which is that the label of convicted felon is probably not going to last for too much longer, okay? According to CNN legal analyst Elie Honig, he basically believes that the charges against Trump may be unconstitutional and that there's a decent chance that Trump's conviction will get overturned on appeal. Take a look.
Already said two things. First of all, they said, what's the harm? You're going to get sentenced to 0. You can do it by Zoom. You can roll out of bed and do it. And second of all, you do maybe have substantial issues. I think he has substantial issues on appeal, but you can handle them through the full appeal process that will follow your sentencing.
They're saying you don't need to do this right now. There are normal channels to handle this through, but Trump just doesn't want it to happen before he becomes president.
And you know what's maybe ironic about it? Trump actually gets a benefit by being sentenced tomorrow, which is once that sentencing is over, as of tomorrow morning, then he can take his full appeals. He can go up the New York courts of appeals. He can go maybe to the U.S. Supreme Court and say the charge against me was unconstitutional, which I think it may be. He can say that the jury was not properly instructed. But if he had gotten his way, if he was not sentenced tomorrow, he would not have been able to appeal. That would have been it. So this sentence would have sort of died in netherworld.
Well, and part of their argument had been that it was going to be too tough for him to get sentenced tomorrow, that he couldn't show up to the sentencing in New York. The justices made a point, the 5 who ruled that this could happen, and said that it was relatively insubstantial in light of what the court is saying that they're going to do, which is to impose that sentence of unconditional discharge. And it's a brief virtual hearing. He doesn't have to be there in person tomorrow.
So this was a smart move by Judge Merchan, because he said last week, I'm going to sentence you to essentially nothing, and you can do it by Zoom. If Merchan had not done that, if he just said, appear for sentencing Friday, it'll be like any other sentencing. You don't know what you're going to get until I tell you. That might have changed the Supreme Court's calculus, because Trump's argument was, I could be subject to what we call irreparable harm. And if Trump was able to say, I don't know, maybe this guy's going to try to lock me up. Maybe he's going to impose some serious penalty. Maybe I don't have the time as president-elect to travel to New York and sit in a courtroom and go through security. Instead, Merchan absolutely minimized that.
Yeah, so I want you guys to understand how this situation shows the current desperation from the Democrats and the mainstream liberal media, okay? Because this is simply just a last-ditch effort to smear Trump before the inauguration and nothing more, really, to be honest with you, because there's nothing more that they can do, right? Judge Merchan basically made the calculation that, well, if I try to actually punish Trump, then it's going to put the whole case, the sentencing, in jeopardy, okay, because the Supreme Court may step in and stop it, which would basically effectively kind of kill everything that has happened thus far, right? That would be a problem in and of itself. So therefore, he was forced to give Trump no punishment at all. Okay, he didn't even have to show up to the courtroom in order to preserve Trump's status as a convicted felon. Okay, however, because of the fact that he's now officially been sentenced, Trump can start the appeals process in which he can fight back against the label of convicted felon due to the fact that everybody knows that trial was rigged. And as Elie Honig admits, probably unconstitutional, okay, that he's going to be able to appeal in the state of New York. And if that doesn't go the way that President Trump hopes it goes, then he can maybe potentially appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court as well, okay? So he's going to have plenty of chances to have this conviction overturned, and that is what I can't wait for, right? I cannot wait for the conviction to be overturned, right? So that's why I'm not really tripping that much about the sentencing being upheld, because ultimately it allows Trump to go ahead and get started with overturning the conviction altogether. And once the conviction gets overturned, then that will further diminish the credibility of the mainstream liberal media that basically smeared anybody who rightfully criticized that trial and the integrity of the trial, the integrity of the judge, the jury selection process, the jury instruction process. They smeared everybody criticizing that as conspiracy theories, right? You're trying to undermine the justice system. You can't criticize the judge. Again, once this conviction is overturned, which I believe it will be, they're going to have to retract the whole convicted felon label, right? They're not going to be able to use it anymore, okay? And that's going to make them look really stupid and, again, diminish their credibility even more so than it is right now, which, again, is hard to believe. It's hard to believe that the mainstream liberal media could get less credible. However, again, if this conviction is overturned, it's going to look real bad for them, because a lot of people were criticizing this trial at the time. A lot of people, I think the American people as a whole, believed that it was rigged, and having this conviction be overturned will be confirmation that it was rigged, that it was politically motivated, which, again, this is something that the mainstream media and Democrats said was a conspiracy theory, right? Just a right-wing, far-right conspiracy theory. So with that being said, this is kind of a good thing, to be honest with you, right? It's not a bad thing. That's why I said this is a delayed W. Okay, we get the sentencing out of the way. Who cares about Trump being labeled a convicted felon? Nobody really cares. Okay, he's still going to be president, and this allows for the process of appealing this, getting the conviction overturned to start. And that's the most important part about this. Okay, that is what people should take away from this process. At the end of the day, hey, if you told me a year ago that Trump would end up a convicted felon, but literally nothing would happen to him and he would still be president of the United States, I think a vast majority of conservatives, of Trump supporters, would take that, right? They would say, okay, cool, I'm totally fine with that outcome. That's perfectly okay with me. I mean, you're talking about a conviction in the one case that nobody gave a damn about, right? The weakest case that is clearly politically motivated, the easiest to get overturned on appeal. Yeah, I think most people would consider this to be a victory for Trump. I mean, even CNN is saying, yeah, Trump won. Okay, again, if you asked me a year ago about this, I would say, yeah, I'll take that, right? That's definitely a victory for Trump. But again, as of right now, I'm calling it a delayed W, okay? Even though it is a W, I mean, Trump won. But I think the ultimate W comes when the conviction is overturned and Trump's whole record is clean and that effectively nothing happened whatsoever to him, despite the political persecutions, despite the sparing from the mainstream liberal media, despite them trying to throw him off the ballot, that he became president. We had a great 4 years and everything they threw against him didn't work, right? That's ultimately what I want to see. That is the ultimate W. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.